At 80, Tom Selleck has reached a stage in life where reflection comes naturally and honesty feels necessary. After decades in Hollywood, he no longer feels pressured to protect images or polish memories. And in this reflective chapter, Selleck has finally spoken openly about a man whose shadow loomed large over his generation of actors, Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen was more than a movie star. He was a force. By the time Tom Selleck was still fighting for recognition, McQueen had already become the embodiment of cinematic cool. Born on March 24, 1930, McQueen's rise from a troubled youth to the world's highest-paid actor was the stuff of legend. He wasn't just admired, he was studied, imitated, and feared by studios for his refusal to conform. Tom Selleck, born on January 29, 1945, entered Hollywood at a very different time. Where McQueen's era was built on rebellion and raw masculinity, Selleck's generation faced a more commercial, image-driven industry. Yet the comparison between the two men was inevitable. Both tall, rugged, charismatic, and effortlessly masculine, Selleck was often described as the next Steve McQueen, a label that followed him for years. At 80, Selleck admits that comparison was both flattering and frustrating. Steve McQueen wasn't someone you tried to be, Selleck once reflected. He was someone you learned from, or stayed out of the way of. What Tom Selleck now openly acknowledges is that McQueen represented a kind of freedom that Hollywood rarely allows. McQueen fought studios, rejected scripts, and demanded creative control in an era when actors were expected to fall in line. Selleck admired that independence deeply, even while recognizing the personal cost that came with it. According to Selleck, Steve McQueen was intensely private, fiercely competitive, and emotionally guarded. On screen, McQueen projected confidence and dominance, but off camera, he was restless, suspicious of authority, and constantly testing boundaries. Selleck believes that inner tension fueled McQueen's magnetism, but also contributed to the turmoil that followed him throughout his life. There was always something burning under the surface with Steve, Selleck said. That's what made him electric. But it's also what made him hard to be around. Unlike McQueen, Selleck chose a more measured path. While he achieved global fame as Magnum P.I., he avoided the chaos that often surrounded superstardom. Looking back, Selleck admits that watching McQueen helped shape that decision. He saw how fame could amplify both strengths and flaws, and he consciously chose stability over rebellion. Selleck also addressed a long-standing misconception that McQueen disliked him or felt threatened by him. At 80, Selleck finally put that rumor to rest. There was no feud, he explained. Steve didn't feud. He observed. If anything, he was curious. What Selleck believes now is that McQueen recognized something familiar in him, another actor navigating expectations, image, and the pressure to live up to a myth. But where McQueen embraced confrontation, Selleck preferred quiet endurance. One truth Selleck has finally shared is that Steve McQueen was deeply insecure, despite his swagger. Beneath the cool exterior was a man constantly proving himself, against studios, against critics, and against his own past. Selleck doesn't say this as criticism, but as understanding. He never escaped where he came from, Selleck noted. And sometimes that gives you drive. Other times, it never lets you rest. Selleck also spoke about McQueen's impact on masculinity in film. Before McQueen, heroes were polished and idealized. McQueen made flaws attractive. He made silence powerful. He showed that vulnerability didn't need to be explained, it could simply exist. For Selleck, that legacy mattered. Steve changed the language of film, Selleck said. He didn't perform masculinity. He lived it. Yet Selleck is honest about the darker side of that influence. McQueen's refusal to compromise often isolated him. His intensity could push people away. And his relentless need for control sometimes overshadowed collaboration. Selleck admits that while he admired McQueen's strength, he didn't want to inherit his loneliness. At 80, Selleck speaks with compassion, not judgment. Steve paid a price for being Steve McQueen, he said. And it was a heavy one. Perhaps the most revealing moment comes when Selleck reflects on mortality. McQueen died in 1980 at just 50 years old, while Selleck continues working well into his 80s. That contrast isn't lost on him. Longevity isn't just luck, Selleck reflected. It's choices. He believes McQueen lived intensely, but not sustainably. And while that intensity created unforgettable cinema, it also shortened the time McQueen had to evolve beyond his image. Selleck's words are not an exposé, they're a reckoning. A man looking back at another man who defined an era, understanding him not as a symbol but as a human being. At 80, Tom Selleck doesn't try to elevate himself above Steve McQueen, nor does he romanticize him blindly. Instead, he tells the truth as he sees it. McQueen was brilliant, difficult, magnetic, and ultimately tragic. A man who reshaped Hollywood but couldn't escape his own fire. In finally breaking his silence, Selleck offers something rare: clarity without cruelty, admiration without illusion. He honors Steve McQueen not by mythologizing him, but by acknowledging his complexity. And in doing so, Selleck reveals something about himself as well. A man who chose steadiness over spectacle, endurance over rebellion, and quiet integrity over legend. For Hollywood Spotlight, John Kahane Channel, this moment isn't about rivalry. It's about perspective. Two icons, two paths, one era, and the truth that only time can uncover. At 80, Tom Selleck isn't rewriting history. He's finally telling it straight.